Hey guys, welcome to Study IQ. My name is Prashant Dhawan, and in this video we are going to learn about East Timor, a very important country, small yet important. So we shall find out in this video why Indonesia attacked this country, why is East Timor so important, what sort of dispute does East Timor have with Australia. A lot to know, a lot to discuss. Let's start. And if you are preparing for any examination, then Study IQ is with you. Our pen drive and tablet courses are available for all the exams that you see on the screen: SSC, RBI Grade B, bank exams, UPSC, CLAT. To order any pen drive and tablet courses, you can visit studyiq.com. You can also call these numbers for more information. The country of East Timor is also called Timor-Leste. It is an island nation in the eastern Lesser Sunda Islands. Alright, this is the map of East Timor. The capital of this country is Dili, Dili. Alright, so that is why whenever I see someone wearing these kind of t-shirts, of course they do want to express their affection towards the capital of India, New Delhi. But since they write the spelling, the name of the city like this, one might mistake them as admirers of East Timor. Anyway, jokes aside, let's have a look at the map. You can clearly see that East Timor has a territorial boundary with Indonesia, and it has a part over here and here. Now this entire island is called the Timor Island. There was a time when the western part of Timor and eastern part of Timor was a unified country, it was a single country, but now the western part belongs to Indonesia, the eastern part is an independent country. Now observe this part near Australia. This is the Timor Island. The eastern part is called East Timor. The western part is of course part of Indonesia. The Timor Island, or rather I should say East Timor, is located right here near the Timor Sea and Banda Sea. The Banda Sea is between Indonesia and East Timor, and the Timor Sea is between Timor and Australia. Make sure that you remember this. This location is quite important. Do not mistake this East Timor region for Papua New Guinea. Alright, these two islands are quite different, although they might be mistaken if one is in a hurry. A very interesting fact about East Timor is that this Asian country, yes, East Timor is considered an Asian country. Papua New Guinea, of course, it is considered a country in the Oceania region. Alright. Now, East Timor is the only Asian country that is 8 degrees below the equator. Alright, the entire country is below the equator. The currency over here is United States dollar. The population is very small, 1.2 million only, and the major religion is Christianity. This is quite important because other than East Timor, there is only Philippines that follows Christianity in that region. Most of the countries are followers of either Buddhism or Islam. The highest peak in East Timor is Mount Ramelau. It is 2,963 meters above sea level, and it is a tourist attraction. Not because of its height or how big the entire peak is. It is because it is a very spiritual site. Alright, this is the country's highest peak, but also a site for deep religious and cultural significance. Because on top of this Mount Ramelau, you will find a statue of Virgin Mary. Virgin Mary, of course, is a very important figure in Christian religion. So Christian pilgrims from around the world, they visit this place, and you can see it is quite a majestic sight. This is the top of this mountain, and this is the statue of Virgin Mary. There was a time in history when East Timor and West Timor were part of a single country. There was no division. But in 1600s, the Portuguese arrived and they invaded the entire Timor Island. They set up trading posts and they used this island as a source of sandalwood. Later on in 1749, there was competition because after Portuguese, the Dutch wanted a piece of this land and they wanted a stay over here because it was an important trading post in the region. So there was a war between the Portuguese army and the Dutch. The Dutch, of course, are people of Netherlands. So there was a war between them, and after the war, this island was split into two. The green part over here, it was part of the Portuguese controlled region, this little piece of land over here as well, and the orange one remained with the Dutch. So after that, for many centuries, the Timor Island was split between the Dutch and the Portuguese until World War II started. In 1942, the Japanese invaded the Timor Island and they fought with the Australian soldiers there. Thousands of Australian soldiers were slaughtered by the Japanese soldiers, and even to this day in 2018, people in Australia, they observe the mass killings of the Australian soldiers by the Japanese troops. And the Japanese controlled this island until 1945, of course, till the end of World War II, when Japan surrendered. So after World War II ended and Japanese troops left the Timor Island, the Portuguese government regained control of East Timor, but the western part of the Timor Island, it was captured by Indonesia. Alright, so the Dutch never really came back to reclaim their lands. It was just captured by Indonesia. And it stayed this way for a lot of years. From 1945 to 1975, West Timor was under the Indonesian control and East Timor was under the Portuguese control. In 1974, a very interesting thing happened in Portugal. There was a coup and a new government came to power. This new government believed that Portugal does not need colonies anymore, so they decided that East Timor will become an independent country. So in 1975, in a very, I would say, unceremonious way and in a very unusual manner, the Portuguese left East Timor, and it was very sudden. This new country was not given enough time to actually understand what was going on and to prepare for their sudden independence. But nonetheless, the people were happy that now finally, after years of occupation, they will become an independent country. But this happiness was very short lived, because in a few days, rather in a few weeks, Indonesian troops invaded East Timor. It was a mass scale invasion, and 2 lakh people in East Timor were killed during this invasion. Some were killed by the soldiers of Indonesian army, others were killed by famine and diseases that followed the invasion and during the Indonesian occupation. So after the Indonesian invasion, East Timor had lost 1/4 of its population, and certainly it was now in the darkest phase of its existence. During the occupation of East Timor, Indonesia was seen for most of the time as a flag bearer of anti-communism in Southeast Asia. Because when the Portuguese left, there was an upsurge of communist sentiments in East Timor, and it was believed that this small country in Southeast Asia will become a communist country. So all the countries that supported democracy, like US, Australia, West Germany, all these countries were in favor of the Indonesian occupation of East Timor, even though lakhs of people were being butchered in East Timor. So this right here is a map of all those countries that supported the Indonesian occupation of East Timor. The surprising part here is that most of the countries didn't really have an opinion on this. Why? Because there were a lot of other things happening during the 1970s, like USSR invading Afghanistan, and USA was also busy in other areas of the world, so no one really paid a lot of attention to East Timor. Certainly the international media ignored the East Timor genocide by the Indonesian army. But the interesting thing here is, rather I would say the unfortunate thing here is, that our country India supported the Indonesian occupation of East Timor. This was probably done to have better ties with Indonesia, because it is a very important country for India in terms of trade. And you can see all these countries, Canada, US, all these torch bearers of human rights, they were openly supporting the Indonesian army in East Timor. So from 1975 to the 1990s, the international media paid little or no attention to the invasion of East Timor by Indonesia, and all the atrocities were ignored. Most of the countries in favor of the occupation remained so until 1991, when the Santa Cruz massacre, which was reported by the international journalist, reached the general public. What happened was, there was a huge massacre where 250 people were killed. They were just peacefully protesting against the Indonesian occupation, and everything was recorded on camera, and the images were broadcasted around the world, and people suddenly felt sympathetic towards the people of East Timor, and suddenly there was a wave of support for East Timor independence, even in the developed world, where the governments were actually supporting Indonesia, but now the people were supporting East Timor. Finally, the tiny nation of East Timor saw hope in 1999. After a change of leadership in Indonesia, East Timor was allowed to vote in an independence ballot. So in 1999 September, around 78% people in East Timor, they voted for an independent country, and after a few years in the year 2002, East Timor finally became an independent nation. So right now, as of 2018, East Timor is doing well. It certainly is doing a lot better than it was during the Indonesian occupation. There is no doubt about that. But it is still a country with a lot of poor people, primarily because 70% of the economic infrastructure was destroyed during the Indonesian occupation by the Indonesian army. So because of that, there is still widespread poverty in this country, and it will probably take at least a generation for all these people to get uplifted. Even though East Timor has a lot of oil reserves and the government generates a reasonable amount of revenue, it is quite hard to uplift all the people who were pretty much butchered and quashed by the Indonesian army. Now this country was in the news recently because look, East Timor has a maritime border with Australia. So it is obvious that there will be some maritime border disputes, and there is one between East Timor and Australia about a certain oil field. Recently, in February 2018, both the countries reached an agreement where both the countries will help each other out and they will extract all the natural resources together. So that is definitely a good thing for East Timor, but everything is not going well. IMF and World Bank both have warned the government of East Timor that the economy of this small island country is over reliant on oil resources, because if there is any fluctuation in oil prices, this small country might face a lot of economic crisis, and this country is already finding it quite difficult to recover from all the war-torn past that it had. So it is quite important for the government of East Timor to make sure that their economy is diversified and they don't put all their eggs in one basket. East Timor could also face bankruptcy within a decade. The country is pretty much over-reliant on the petroleum revenues. Still, there is hope that East Timor's government will look towards IMF's advice, and they will invest more in other sectors like agriculture or perhaps some manufacturing or service sector, so that they can generate revenues from other sources. But it seems quite unlikely because there is large-scale corruption in this country as well. And I personally hope that this country manages to see some good days, because it has seen some very bad days so far, and definitely it has a lot of challenges coming towards it, like the bankruptcy and the fluctuation of oil prices, and above all, climate change. So let's wish East Timor all the best, and hopefully you enjoyed this video. You learned a lot about this small country, and I will see you soon with another country video. Thanks for watching. God bless you all.